Hi there. Um, I've had an amazing miracle life, and I wanted to share that with all my relatives and all my friends and future generations. I was born in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, August 30th, 1961. We lived in Pennsylvania well, I was only three when we moved to Livonia, Michigan, but Beaver Falls was always a big part of our lives, as all relatives all lived there, most of them, and that. And we used to visit. Oh boy, I'd say maybe two or three times a year. Um, my birthday was always celebrated in Pennsylvania, which with my birthday being in August and August, it kind of signified that the summer and school always started the week after. Beaver Falls, as I said, it always was a part of us. We um, had just an amazing time there. We used to walk the railroad tracks, smash pennies on the railroad tracks, which don't tell anybody, but that's really illegal. Um, we picked black raspberries, wild black raspberries, and uh, my dad's mom, my grandmother, made black raspberry pies, which were just absolutely awesome. Grandma Vera and Granddad Steve, they used to have my brothers and I stay for a couple weeks, a week or 2 weeks every summer that we stayed with them. Uh, Besides the black raspberries and the railroads, we also um, used to get these fish sandwiches that were just absolutely outrageous, the size of them. They'd have a regular hamburger bun, and they'd be hanging like 4 inches off each side. We went to Hank's frozen custard, and at that point in time, there wasn't any frozen custard places in Michigan, and now there's a lot of them actually. And Ritter's is the new one that we have here that I'd like to go a couple times this summer. Um, I could eat there much more often though. If I got out more, I'm only getting out about once or twice a week now. Um, I'm in my, oh boy, my 32nd year out of the hospital, and we'll get into that later though. We also uh, we also used to always have a spaghetti dinner with my mom's mom, Grandma Betty, and we always looked forward to it. She always knocked it out of the park, and Grandma Betty was she was a tough, strong woman. She was uh, divorced, so she was a single mom. And I never met my grandfather. Well, I met him, but I didn't know my grandfather on my mother's side. And it really was his loss because our family was just a terrific family. And mom was a perfect mom. Dad was absolutely awesome too. And me and my siblings and all of our kids and that, uh, he really missed out on a lot. And I think if he knew all that he missed out on, he would not have uh, not been a part of our lives. When we went back, I mentioned earlier that Ron, Tim, and I used to go back and play with or stay with Grandma and Granddad. And we we had a buddy, Mike Namath, and you have to Google the name, and the name that you Google would be Joe Namath. He was a quarterback for the New York Jets, and they won the third Super Bowl, and that was the first big game that I remember in the household. because mom and dad, well, my mom grew up just a few blocks from Joe Namath where he grew up. And so it was a really, really big deal that everybody was rooting for the Jets. It was 1969 was the year, and I was 8 at the time. And as I said, that was the first game that that I remember, watching. Continuing on with Beaver Falls, I thought of a couple more things that we used to do every summer. We used to go to Kennywood Park, which was an excellent amusement park, just a shade smaller than Cedar Point, but boy, they really had some roller coasters, and I'll talk about roller coasters in a little while, and that because I have a good story about roller coasters and scariest rides ever. After moving to Michigan in 1964, like I said before, I was 3 years old, and we moved to a new house in 1973, and I just got into middle school. The house that we moved into, it was 3 acres of fun. We had a jacuzzi, a sauna, pinball machine, big screen TVs before they were actually in vogue, and that we were one of the first families that I knew on all my friends that were lucky enough to have a big screen TV. We also, with the 3 acres, we had 2 wild peacocks and a wild turkey, which is just crazy in Livonia because Livonia is a city of 100,000 people, and by no means is it farming country. But we had the peacocks for several years, and also one of the turkeys, the female peacock, passed away right about the time that we bought the house. And I used to win bets with people because I bet people at high school that I bet them $1 and that we had the 2 peacocks and the wild turkey, and people freaked out when they saw them, and I made a little bit of money off of it, not too much. I always had a thing with nature, loved butterflies, frogs, snakes, you name it. We had a couple times I saw red foxes in the backyard. They have a lot of deer there now, although when we were growing up, we did not have deer in the backyard. Some bee sting stories that I have. The first one would have to be when I was in 7th grade and my brother Tim was in 9th grade. I was making an insect collection for biology class, and I caught a bee that was in the ground. The hive was underground, and so I caught the bee, and I put the bee in the jar in the garage, and I went and sat down with my brother Tim. He was watching a movie after school, and I had these. I thought they were really cool at the time, and I'm embarrassed to admit they were red velvet pants, and they were bell bottoms, and they were my favorite pants. And like I said, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit I thought they were cool then, but they're still cool. So I sit down with Tim, and I feel a real sharp like pin, and right around my thigh area, and I'm like going, that kind of stung a little bit. And then I got a second one, and after the second pinprick, I put two and two together and realized that a bee had flown up my belt bottom pants. And I lifted up my pant leg, and the bee was flying around inside my pants. So I jump up and start whipping my pants off, and then I'm jumping all over the place. And my brother Tim goes, "What the hell are you doing, Mike?" And I go, damn bee. And ripped my pants off, got them off, and I had two stings in my leg. Another one, bee sting story. There was a beehive in and I'm backing up a couple years actually to sixth grade, but there was a beehive in the ventilator at our elementary school, and I was dared to go up and kick it, and I said, bee stings don't hurt that bad, I'll give it a shot. Well, I kicked the bee, I kicked the ventilator where the beehive was in, and a bee flew out, well, several flew out, but one flew out and stung me once again in the thigh, and I had jeans on, I had Levi jeans on, and the bee got stung. It actually got stung when it stung me, and my buddy Pete had to come over, and I was so shocked that the thing was hanging out of my leg. My buddy Pete came over and pulled the bee actually out of my pant leg, and that. I'm trying to think of other bee sting stories. I used to catch them in my hands and cup them, and that was another bet that I did, that I could, the phone's ringing. Oh, it doesn't matter. I used to catch bees in my hand, cup them real fast, and I would, $100 bet.
Hello?
Continuing on with the bee sting stories, I didn't make much money, and I didn't always charge people, but I cupped the bees really quick and let go before they could sting my hand. And I did that, probably a couple dozen times. And finally, I got a bee sting, and it got me really good. And I decided to drop that bet, and I stopped catching bees in my hands. So I was a little bit of a slow learner. Other things, we had a groundhog that we used to chase in the backyard, and the one time my buddy and I caught up with the groundhog, put a garbage can over him, and then we were yelling, "We caught the groundhog, we got the groundhog." And then we looked at each other and said, "Oh, what do we do now?" Because we had a groundhog underneath the garbage can, and I was thinking he was going to be pretty irate. So we ended up kicking at the can, not the groundhog. And we kicked the can and ran like hell. And we got away, and the groundhog fortunately went the other way. One of my favorite stories too is the snake. We owned when we owned both houses, and it was in our transition, in our moving, and that would have been in 1973. And my buddy and I, we found a snake, and I was bound and determined to catch the snake. When I went to catch it, my buddy was afraid to, and I wasn't, so I went to catch the snake, and it got my finger and bit me pretty good. There was venom and blood. It actually drew blood. And I said, oh my God, now what do I do? Well, we were a good, probably quarter mile from home, and that was taking the shortcut through the woods. And so we got a stick and we started throwing the snake um, down the pavement, and we had to go through several hundred yards of the pavement. And then by the time we got to the grass and where the trees were, the snake was pretty beat up. But so we actually would fling them into the grass area. We had to go up the hill at my mom and dad's house, and we got it all the way back to our house. Well, when I showed my mom was pretty upset and asked me what I was doing. I said, I was just catching the snake, Ma. And I looked up garter snakes were the most prominent in our area. And when I looked that up, the one thing that made me worry less about it possibly being poisonous was the dictionaries, or I'm sorry, encyclopedias, which we had to use, uh, which now everything's on computer and that you could call it right up. But we had an encyclopedia set that we had to go back and look at. And when I looked it up, it said that the venom on the garter snake had an odor to it. And my finger had a bad odor to it, in addition to the blood that it drew in that. Well, we called the Nathan Mills Nature Conservancy at Edward Hines Drive, and they said to run the snake over and they would verify whether it was a poisonous snake or a garter snake. Well, when we got there, they said that it was a garter snake and not a poisonous snake. So I felt lucky at that point that I wasn't messing around with a poisonous snake. But they also asked if they could keep the snake because they didn't have one on display. So the snake that bit me, Mike Snake, ended up at the Nathan Mills Nature Center. They didn't put my name on it or anything, unfortunately, but really cool that they kept it there, though. Oh boy, more critter stories. Um, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but when we were teenagers and went to Florida, we woke up in the morning and my mom and dad would take a walk down the beach, and they told all the kids. Tim wasn't with us right then, but it was Karen, Becky, Ron, and I, and we were in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Mom and Dad said, be careful, don't walk in the water, because there were a ton of jellyfish out that day. And we're like, Uncle Red and I were like, Uncle Red. I'm used to telling stories to the nieces and nephews, obviously, because I said Uncle Red. My brother Red and I were going down to the beach, and Grandma and Granddad, or Mom and Dad in this case, they said, don't walk on the beach or don't walk in the shallow water because of the jellyfish. So we get down there and they have signs posted that say, careful, don't walk in the shallow water, jellyfish. Well, we started to walk in the shallow water, which obviously we weren't really paying attention when Mom and Dad warned us or the signs. And we had a lifeguard say to us, you guys better be careful. A lot of jellyfish out there. So we looked at each other, shrugged our shoulders, and kept on walking in the shallow water. Well, I went to step down, and my brother Ron yelled at me to watch out. And before I knew it, a jellyfish had wrapped around my ankle, and it stung really bad. It was like, oh boy, 20 bee stings in one. And I actually went down in the water and that was a scary thing because I didn't know a whole lot about jellyfish. I didn't know if they were, poisonous, they were, uh, if it was life threatening and that. So we went back to the room and we caught up with my mom and dad. They were not happy. To say the least, they were not happy at all. And I can't really blame them though. So we called the hospital, and the hospital said to soak it in, I believe it was rubbing alcohol. And so we filled the bathtub up, and I had to soak my foot in rubbing alcohol. Wasn't able to go out to dinner that night, and my punishment really was I wasn't able to go outside and go out in the sun, and no more walking in the shallow water too. But that goes without saying. And I think the lesson this taught me, and all you kids should follow, is first of all, you should listen to your mom and dad. But if you don't listen to your mom and dad, for God's sakes, listen to the lifeguard, because they know what they're doing, and jellyfish stings, they hurt. they hurt really bad. Florida was always a part of our all our vacations were in Florida pretty much. We went to Disney World the first year it opened, and it was the Magic Kingdom there, and it seemed like this, great, huge park and that, and it's 20 times the size now, approximately, I would say, compared to when we first went. But our first trip there was really, really cool. We rode the Space Coaster ride, Spacebound it's called, actually. And it's not a huge roller coaster, but it was in the dark, and it was really, you were like a jet engine almost, like going through it. And it was one of my favorite rides growing up. And like I said, Disney World became our place to vacation. And really, if you go to Disney World and you're not young, and if that doesn't make you feel young, then you've probably gotten too old. Golfing was a big part of our upbringing also. My first golf experience was at a pitch and putt that they have in Pennsylvania. It was a par three course, but they gave you two clubs. You picked out a putter and like a 7-9 or a pitching wedge, and I usually used the 9-iron. And the holes were anywhere from 20 yards to maybe 50 yards, might have been the longest on it. And we used to do that every summer a couple times. Back here at home, they had, it was $1 for 9 holes of golf on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Junior day, they called it. And you could actually do, 18 holes for $2, which was just insane. And they had I didn't like getting up early. I was pretty much a night owl and that, but we get up about 7 a.m. to go out golfing during the summer. We also did putt-putt golf, which I might have been best at putt-putt golf and video golf. Uh, Better than lawn golf, although I was pretty average. I was a bogey golfer in that. But we had the putt-putt course. I They had $1 day, and it was a 5 hour block. You could put all you wanted. They had 3 different courses, and it was $1. I mean, we spent more money on the cold pop and that than we did on the golf itself. And I do have a funny story about the putt-putt golf. My sister Karen was so kind to be filming this, and she's turning a little red here. She called up putt-putt golf and asked, by the way, how much is $1 day? After asking what time of they had, and the person on the other line kind of chuckled a little bit and said that would be $1. It's called $1 day. But what's funny about that, a year or two later, they changed it to double $1 day, so it was $2 after that. But I'm laughing as I think about that. And we also, I'm not sure which one of my sisters did, but they called up bowling alley, and that would be Karen also. She just put her hand up. But she said, do you have any free bowling? And she meant to say, do you have any open bowling? But she asked if they had any free bowling. They're like, no, we don't have any free bowling. I'm trying to think of what other. I'm going to go back to Disney World a little bit, and I have a lot of. I this whole project. I want to tell short stories, funny short stories about my life, my family, and so on and so forth. I'm going to take a break now, and I'll get some lunch, and we'll pick it up later.